As I sit down to share my story, nearly 2 decades have thinned the veil between that day and the life I've lived since. It's a strange feeling, putting pen to paper, not because the memories have faded, they haven't, but because the weight of them feels just as heavy now as it did then. My name isn't important, who I am is not the heart of this story. I was one among many who stepped into the shadow of the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, a firefighter by profession, a rescuer by duty, and, unbeknownst to me at the time, a witness to an encounter that defied explanation. The tale I'm about to unfold isn't just one of tragedy and terror, of a city and a nation brought to its knees. It's also about the unseen battles fought in the midst of chaos, of an ominous presence that seemed to thrive on despair and sorrow. This isn't a story of ghosts or haunted houses, the kind you might tell with a flashlight under your chin to spook your friends. It's about something much more subtle, yet profoundly unsettling, a darkness that felt as real as the flames and smoke we braved. We all know the public narrative of that day, the images broadcasted across the world, the heroism, the horror. But within the crevices of those monumental events, there are personal stories that haven't seen the light of day, experiences that defy conventional understanding. As you join me on this journey, keep in mind that this is a recounting of my own experiences, seen through the lens of someone who doesn't claim to understand what happened beyond the reach of the flames and the rubble. This is my attempt to make sense of the insensible, to give voice to the silence that followed the roar of collapsing towers. It's a tribute to those who fell, those who stood, and those who continue to bear the unseen scars of that September morning. Welcome to the shadows of September, where the line between the tangible and the unfathomable blurs, and where courage takes on a dimension far beyond what I ever thought possible. The morning started just like any other, with a relentless buzz of my alarm clock cutting through the silence of my small apartment in Queens. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow through the curtains. I remember lying there for a moment, caught between the remnants of sleep and the reality of the day ahead. It was a Tuesday, my third consecutive day on shift, and if it were anything like the days before, it'd be filled with the usual mix of routine calls and false alarms. Little did I know, the routine was about to be shattered in a way none of us could have imagined. I dragged myself out of bed, the familiar ache in my muscles greeting me like an old friend. The life of a firefighter isn't kind to the body, but it's a small price to pay for the privilege of serving others. My morning ritual was simple and practiced. A quick shower, a shave, and a strong cup of coffee that served as both my breakfast and my wake-up call. The apartment was quiet, save for the mundane sounds of city life drifting through the open window, a car alarm here, the distant wail of a siren there. Pulling on my uniform, the weight of the badge on my chest felt reassuring, a tangible reminder of the oath I'd taken to protect and serve. I tied my boots with practiced hands, the leather worn and comfortable from years of use. A glance at the clock told me I was running late, a rarity for me, but the anticipation of another day at the station filled me with a sense of purpose that hurried my steps. The drive to the station was uneventful, the streets of New York slowly coming to life as the city awoke. Taxi cabs honked impatiently at slower vehicles, and pedestrians hustled along the sidewalks, lost in their own worlds. I savored the normalcy of it all, the everyday chaos of city life that I had come to love and protect. Upon arrival at the fire station, the atmosphere was relaxed, the morning briefing yet to begin. My fellow firefighters were scattered around the common room, some watching the news on the old television mounted in the corner, others preparing their gear for the day ahead. The smell of coffee filled the air, mixing with the scent of grease and metal that seemed to permeate every fire station across the country. We exchanged greetings and banter, the camaraderie among us built on shared experiences and the unspoken knowledge that each call could be our last. It was a brotherhood like no other, forged in the heat of flames and solidified through years of trust and mutual respect. As the morning briefing got underway, the lieutenant outlined the day's duties and assignments with the usual efficiency. We were expecting a standard day. A safety inspection at a local school, training exercises in the afternoon, and, of course, being on standby for any emergency calls. Little did we know, our plans were about to be upended, our lives forever changed by an event that would redefine not only our city but the entire world. The calm of the morning was shattered by the shrill ring of the alarm, a sound that never failed to quicken the pulse. But this was no ordinary call. The urgency in the dispatcher's voice was palpable as they relayed the unimaginable. A plane had struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. In that moment, the typical morning routine of a New York City firefighter gave way to a day of unprecedented tragedy and heroism, a day that would test the limits of our courage and humanity. The alarm's shrill ring cut through the morning air, a sound we were all too familiar with, yet always ready to respond to. This time, however, the urgency in the dispatcher's voice was different, more frantic, as if the weight of the message it carried was almost too heavy to bear. All units, the voice crackled over the speaker, the static barely concealing the tension. A plane has struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. In an instant, the laid-back atmosphere of the firehouse was replaced by a flurry of activity. The joking and laughter ceased, replaced by the sound of boots on concrete, zippers being pulled, and the clanking of gear. There was no need for words, we all knew what we had to do. The gravity of the situation was apparent, yet the full scope of what had happened was still beyond our comprehension. A plane hitting the North Tower. How? Why? There was no time for questions, only action. We donned our gear with practiced speed, each movement honed by countless drills and real-world emergencies. But as familiar as the motions were, there was a palpable sense of urgency unlike any I had felt before. Helmets secured, oxygen tanks checked, we piled into the fire trucks, the engines roaring to life with a growl that seemed to echo the seriousness of the moment. The streets of New York, already bustling with the morning rush, became arteries leading us to the heart of an unfolding disaster. Sirens blaring, lights flashing, we wove through traffic, the urgency of our mission clearing a path. Pedestrians stopped to watch as the convoy of fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars sped past, a tangible wave of anxiety spreading through the city. As we approached the World Trade Center, the smoke became visible, a dark plume rising against the clear blue sky, a stark ominous signal of the chaos we were racing towards. The closer we got, the more the magnitude of the situation began to sink in. The North Tower, one of the twin beacons of New York's skyline, was wounded, black smoke billowing from its upper floors, an incongruous sight against the backdrop of a city that symbolized resilience and strength. Arriving at the scene, the chaos was palpable. People were running, screaming, covered in dust and debris, their faces etched with fear and disbelief. The sound of sirens filled the air, a cacophony of urgency and alarm. We were met with a scene of utter devastation, a nightmare unfolding in broad daylight. But there was no time to pause, no time to process the horror before us. Lives were at stake, and our duty was clear. We jumped from the trucks before they had fully stopped, grabbing our equipment and making our way towards the tower. The heat was intense, the air filled with the acrid smell of burning that would become all too familiar in the hours to come. Commands were shouted, teams formed, and roles assigned with military precision. We were firefighters, trained for moments like this, yet nothing could have fully prepared us for the reality of the situation. As we entered the building, the true scale of the disaster began to reveal itself. The impact had caused devastation on an unimaginable scale, fires raging, structures compromised, and so many people trapped, injured, or worse. It was in this moment, amidst the chaos and the danger, that we committed ourselves to the task ahead. We were there to save lives, to battle the blaze, and to stand as beacons of hope in the darkest of times. The day had started like any other, but it would end as a day that none of us would ever forget. The moment our boots hit the ground outside the World Trade Center, the reality of the catastrophe we were facing hit me with the force of a physical blow. The scene was one of utter chaos and confusion, a maelstrom of noise, smoke, and movement that threatened to overwhelm the senses. My first impression was the sheer scale of the disaster. It was like stepping into a war zone, right in the heart of New York City. The air was thick with dust and debris, making it difficult to see and breathe, a tangible reminder of the violence of the impact. People were everywhere, civilians staggering away from the site, their faces blank with shock or streaked with tears, emergency responders rushing toward the danger, and officers trying to establish some semblance of order amidst the pandemonium. The screams and cries for help were almost drowned out by the cacophony of sirens and the rumble of collapsing structures. It was a scene of devastation unlike anything I had ever witnessed, a nightmare brought to life on a sunny September morning. Despite the confusion and the fear that was palpable in the air, there was also a strong sense of purpose among the responders. I felt it in myself, a deep-seated resolve to do whatever was necessary to save lives, to bring people to safety, to fight back against the destruction. My team and I exchanged looks, a silent communication that said all that needed to be said. The initial shock of the scene quickly gave way to action. We began to coordinate with other units, receiving brief updates and instructions over the radio. The situation was fluid, the information sparse and sometimes contradictory, but we pressed on, driven by the knowledge that every second counted. The side of the North Tower, smoke billowing from its upper floors, served as a grim beacon, drawing us toward the danger. As we approached the building, the reality of what we were about to undertake became even more apparent. Debris littered the ground, a jagged landscape of shattered glass, twisted metal, and fragments of what had once been part of the tower. Firefighters, police officers, and medical personnel worked side by side, a testament to the city's resilience and the bravery of its people. The air was filled with the sound of breaking glass, the roar of flames, and the shouted commands of those leading the response. In those first moments at the scene, amid the chaos and the confusion, my focus narrowed to the task at hand. The fear, the horror of what had happened, was pushed to the back of my mind, replaced by the training and the instincts that guide a firefighter's actions. There was work to be done, lives to be saved, and despite the enormity of the disaster, I felt a deep, unwavering conviction that we would do everything in our power to make a difference. The resolve to save lives was not just a personal commitment, it was a collective one, shared by every responder who rushed toward the towers that day. In the face of unimaginable tragedy, it was this resolve that defined us, that gave us the strength to move forward into the smoke and the danger. It was a testament to the human spirit, to the courage and the compassion that emerge in the darkest of times. Entering the World Trade Center on that September morning was like stepping into the mouth of a volcano. The air inside was a swirling miasma of smoke and dust, so thick it seemed to swallow the beam of my flashlight hole. The lobby, once a bustling hub of activity, was now a scene of devastation. Shattered glass crunched underfoot, and pieces of the building's interior lay scattered like the aftermath of an explosion. Above us, the structure groaned ominously, a reminder that we were in a race against time, not just against the fire, but against the very integrity of the tower itself. The sounds enveloping us were a cacophony of disaster. The crackling of fire was almost constant, punctuated by the occasional thunderous crash of something heavy giving way. Alarms blared endlessly, their warnings merging into a relentless drone that seemed to come from every direction. Over all this, the voices of my fellow firefighters and the people we were there to save cut through, calling out to each other, shouting instructions, or simply crying out in fear and confusion. Visibility was near zero, the smoke stinging my eyes and clogging my lungs, despite the mask I wore. Every breath was a battle, and the heat. The heat was like nothing I had ever experienced. It pressed in from all sides, a physical presence that sapped strength and threatened to overwhelm even the most determined of us. But it was the faces of the people we were there to evacuate that stayed with me, etched into my memory amidst the chaos. They emerged from the smoke like ghosts, some stumbling forward with the aid of coworkers or friends, others clutching photos or personal belongings, as if they were lifelines. Their expressions were a mix of relief and terror, their eyes wide with the shock of what was happening around them. Each person we encountered was a story, a life abruptly interrupted by catastrophe. We guided them as best we could, directing them toward safety, offering words of encouragement, and sometimes simply lending a shoulder to lean on. The process of evacuation was chaotic, a logistical nightmare made worse by the damaged state of the building. Stairwells were congested, filled with descending throngs of people and ascending teams of first responders. Communication was difficult, with radio signals often lost amidst the steel and concrete. Yet, through it all, there was a sense of unity, a shared determination among everyone present to get out and to help others do the same. As we worked our way upward, the conditions worsened. The damage inflicted by the plane was more apparent and the fires more intense. We were forced to navigate around obstacles, constantly assessing the risk of further collapses. In some areas, water from the building's sprinkler system added to the confusion, creating slick, hazardous conditions underfoot. In those moments, inside the burning tower, the world outside seemed unreal, a distant place removed from the immediacy of our struggle. Our universe had contracted to the here and now, to the task of moving from one floor to the next, of finding those in need and guiding them to safety. The sound of my own breathing in my ears, the heat bearing down on us, and the faces of those we saved, these were the things that filled my senses, pushing everything else to the margins. The people we were trying to evacuate were a testament to the human spirit. Despite their fear, they moved with purpose, following our instructions, sometimes comforting each other, and occasionally offering words of thanks that, in the midst of such horror, seemed both incredibly poignant and profoundly heartbreaking. Each encounter, each face, added a layer of urgency to our mission, a reminder of the stakes involved and the importance of every life we were striving to save. Entering the World Trade Center that day, facing the smoke, the sounds, and the people caught in an unimaginable nightmare, was an experience that defied description. It was a testament to the worst and the best of what we can face, a moment of profound tragedy and incredible courage. And as we continued our ascent into the heart of the inferno, the resolve that had brought us there only grew stronger, fueled by the lives we were determined to save. As we ascended further into the heart of the tower, a sense of unease began to take hold, an undercurrent of dread that seemed out of place, even amidst the obvious dangers we faced. It wasn't just the fire, the smoke, or the structural groans of the tower under stress, it was something else, something harder to define. Among the chaos, I started to notice odd occurrences that didn't fit with the already surreal reality we were navigating. Shadows that seemed to move against the logic of light, fleeting and insubstantial, drawing my gaze even as my mind told me to focus on the task at hand. At first, I dismissed these glimpses as tricks of the light, or perhaps the disorienting effects of the smoke and heat. But as we moved from floor to floor, the sensation that we were not alone, that we were being watched, or even followed, grew stronger. It was a feeling that prickled at the back of my neck, a whisper of intuition that suggested the presence of something or someone unseen. This sensation was unsettling, to say the least, adding an additional layer of stress to an already fraught situation. The people we were helping evacuate seemed oblivious to these anomalies, focused solely on the tangible threat of the fire and their immediate escape. But among my team, I saw similar flickers of confusion and concern. There were moments when a colleague would pause, their focus shifting over my shoulder, only to shake their head and move on, dismissing the momentary distraction. But the shared glances among us confirmed that I wasn't the only one experiencing these odd sensations. It wasn't long before the occurrences became more pronounced. Shadows that darted just out of sight, not merely reflections of our own movements or those of the evacuees, but something else entirely. These shadows didn't adhere to the physics of light and motion, appearing in places where no direct source could cast them, moving in ways that defied explanation. They were glimpses of something that logic said shouldn't be there, yet unmistakably were. The feeling of being watched intensified as we climbed higher. It was a constant, oppressive sensation, like eyes boring into the back of my head, watching our every move with an intensity that felt almost physical. This unseen scrutiny added an edge of paranoia to our efforts. The rational part of my mind struggled to maintain focus, to attribute these feelings to the stress and adrenaline of the situation. Yet, the primal, instinctual part of me was on high alert, sensing a threat that was as intangible as it was unnerving. These phenomena were not the only concerns we had, of course. The immediate dangers of the fire, the structural damage, and the need to evacuate the remaining occupants were paramount. But this undercurrent of something else, something otherworldly, began to weave its way through our consciousness, an additional layer of complexity in an already complex situation. Discussions about these experiences were brief and hushed, exchanged in quick, puzzled whispers during moments of brief respite. None of us had the words to adequately describe what we were feeling, and there was an unspoken agreement that focusing on the mission was our priority. Yet, these occurrences left an indelible mark on our psyche, a series of unexplained mysteries that would haunt the edges of our thoughts, long after the day was over. As we continued our work, the sense of an ominous presence grew. It was as if the tower itself was alive with more than just the flames that consumed it. The shadows, the feelings of being watched, the unexplainable movements, all of it combined to create an atmosphere of dread that was almost as palpable as the heat and smoke. In a situation already brimming with visible threats, these odd occurrences added an invisible layer of fear, a reminder that not all dangers are seen, and not all enemies are made of flesh and blood. In the midst of the inferno, where the air was thick with smoke and the heat was a tangible force, an inexplicable chill began to weave its way through the corridors and stairwells of the tower. It was a paradox that defied the laws of nature. A coldness that crept over my skin, raising goosebumps even as sweat poured down my face. As we pressed on, the heat of the flames battled with this unseen chill, creating a dissonance that was hard to shake. It wasn't just a physical sensation, it was accompanied by a growing sense of dread, a feeling that we were not alone in our efforts to save the trapped and the endangered. This ominous presence was something beyond the comprehension of us all, an unseen force that seemed to thrive amidst the chaos and the despair. This coldness, this presence, it wasn't constant. It came in waves, ebbing and flowing with the movements of the fire and the shifting dynamics of the rescue operation. There were moments, brief and fleeting, when the chill would intensify, cutting through the heat with such clarity that it would cause me to pause, the sensation so stark that it felt as if time itself had momentarily stilled. In these moments, the sounds of the emergency, the crackling of fire, the shouts of my colleagues, the cries of the evacuees seemed to fade into the background, leaving a silence that was as profound as it was eerie. The presence felt malevolent, a shadow that loomed over us, unseen but deeply felt. It was as if the tragedy and suffering had called it forth, feeding it, allowing it to grow stronger with every passing moment. The chill was its signature, a mark of its passage through the burning floors, a reminder that the physical dangers we faced were not the only threats in the midst of this catastrophe. I wasn't alone in my perceptions. Among the crew, hushed acknowledgements of something unexplainable began to surface. A look exchanged here, a whispered word there, each of us grappling with the reality of our senses, while struggling to maintain focus on our critical, life-saving work. It was a challenge to reconcile the immediate tangible dangers with the growing awareness of something else, something that defied explanation and added a layer of complexity to our mission. The sense of being watched, which had begun as a nagging suspicion, grew into a certainty as the day wore on. It was a gaze that one could feel on the back of their neck, a pressure that hinted at an intelligence, an awareness that was almost curious, almost hungry. This sensation was most acute in the areas where the destruction was greatest, where the despair hung heaviest in the air, as if the presence drew strength from the misery it witnessed. In quieter moments, when the roar of the fire was momentarily subdued, I could almost convince myself that it was all in my mind, a trick played by stress and fatigue. But then, a sudden drop in temperature, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, or the feeling of being closely observed, would bring it all rushing back, the undeniable awareness that we were not alone, that we were intruders in a realm where something else held sway. This unseen chill amidst the flames, this ominous presence, it became a silent companion in our efforts to save lives, a specter that accompanied us as we navigated the hellish landscape of the World Trade Center. It was a haunting contradiction, a coldness that defied the inferno, a watcher in the smoke, a reminder that some forces remain beyond the reach of understanding, even in the face of overwhelming human tragedy. As the day wore on, with the tower increasingly succumbing to the fire and damage, our rescue efforts became more desperate, pushing us deeper into the heart of the chaos. It was during these moments of heightened urgency that we began to encounter brief, unsettling manifestations that seemed to feed on the despair surrounding us. These were not mere tricks of the mind or shadows cast by the fire's erratic light, but appeared as tangible expressions of the anguish that filled the tower. In one instance, as we worked to free a group of people trapped in an office, the air around us grew inexplicably colder, the already dim light seeming to dim further. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of what seemed to be a figure, shrouded in smoke, its edges blurred but unmistakably human in form. It lingered just on the periphery of vision, dissolving when looked at directly, but its presence was palpable, a weight in the air that made the heart race and the skin prickle with unease. These manifestations had no discernible features, no faces or voices, yet they conveyed a profound sense of sorrow and loss. It was as if the collective despair of those caught in the tragedy had taken form, wandering the corridors and stairwells, aimless yet driven by the emotional turmoil that fueled them. Their presence was fleeting, glimpsed in the moments between action and pause, yet each encounter left a lasting imprint, a chill that lingered long after the figure itself had vanished. The encounters grew more frequent as the situation worsened, as if the increasing desperation and fear acted as a beacon, drawing these manifestations closer. In a stairwell choked with smoke and debris, a figure appeared amid the throng of evacuating civilians, moving against the flow, its form vague and shifting. The air around it seemed to throb with a silent misery, a despair so tangible it was almost a physical force, pushing against us as we passed. These beings, if they could be called that, seemed drawn to the most intense concentrations of emotional distress. In areas where the damage was greatest, where the hope of escape grew dimmer, their presence was more pronounced, a dark echo to the human suffering that unfolded. They did not interact with us or the evacuees in any discernible way, yet their passage left a trail of heightened fear and unease, a sense that the despair of the moment was being watched, consumed, and somehow intensified. Discussing these encounters among ourselves was difficult. The focus remained on the task at hand, on saving as many lives as possible, yet in the brief moments of respite, exchanges were made in hushed tones, acknowledgements of something beyond the scope of our understanding. It was a shared experience, unspoken but mutually recognized, a confrontation with a facet of the tragedy that was both deeply personal and utterly incomprehensible. These manifestations, these echoes of despair, added a surreal layer to an already unimaginable situation. They were a reminder of the profound impact of human emotion, of the tangible and intangible legacies of tragedy. As we pressed on, the encounters became a part of our collective experience, a haunting backdrop to the physical and emotional toll of the day, feeding on the chaos, yet offering no solace, only a deeper reflection of the darkness that lay at the heart of the disaster. The situation inside the North Tower, already dire, reached a new level of intensity when the unimaginable happened. The South Tower collapsed. The sound was a monstrous roar, a crushing cacophony that reverberated through the very bones of the building we were in and through our bodies, a tangible wave of shock and disbelief. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the reality of what had occurred too vast, too horrific to fully comprehend. The collapse of the South Tower was not just a physical event, it was a psychological blow, a stark, devastating reminder of our own vulnerability and the sheer scale of the disaster unfolding around us. The urgency that had propelled us forward was now magnified 100-fold. The collapse heightened the stakes, underscored the precariousness of our situation, and instilled a frantic, desperate need to move faster, to save as many lives as possible before we, too, were caught in a similar fate. The air was thick with dust and debris, billowing from the fallen tower, enveloping everything in a choking, blinding cloud that seemed to swallow light and sound. Communications became even more strained, the static-filled radio struggling to convey the rapidly changing directives and information. The command to evacuate the North Tower came through, a stark order that underscored the immediate danger we were all in. Yet, even as we worked to comply, to guide the remaining occupants to safety, the resolve to not leave anyone behind grew stronger. Each firefighter, each first responder, faced an internal battle between the instinct for self-preservation and the unwavering commitment to save others. The atmosphere was one of controlled chaos, a tense, hurried push towards the exits, interspersed with moments of sheer terror as the building shook with aftershocks from the collapse of its twin. The fear was palpable, a living thing that gripped both rescuers and evacuees alike, yet it was met with an equal measure of determination. The knowledge that time was running out added a frenetic edge to every action, every decision carrying the weight of lives in the balance. In the midst of this, the odd occurrences and sensations of being watched that had been noted earlier took on a new dimension. The collapse seemed to have intensified these experiences, as if the destruction and loss had fed the ominous presence, making it stronger, more palpable. The shadows grew darker, the unexplained chills more frequent, adding an eerie undercurrent to an already surreal and nightmarish situation. The collapse of the South Tower was a turning point, a moment that defined the rest of the day. It was a grim reminder of what was at stake, of the fragility of life, and the monumental efforts required to protect it. The dust that settled in the aftermath was a physical manifestation of the tragedy, covering everything in a gray pall that muted colors and sounds, a landscape transformed by loss. As we continued the evacuation, the mood was one of grim resolve. In the harrowing moments following the collapse of the South Tower, as we navigated the treacherous, smoke-filled corridors of the North Tower, a profound realization began to crystallize in my mind. Amidst the tangible, immediate dangers, the fire, the smoke, the potential for further structural collapse, there was an additional, unseen force at work. This was not just a terror attack unfolding in its horrifying reality, there was something else, a malevolence that seemed to weave through the chaos, an undercurrent that was both apart from and intertwined with the day's tragedies. This realization came not as a sudden revelation, but as a slow, dawning understanding, pieced together from the odd occurrences and unexplained sensations that had punctuated our efforts from the start. The shadows moving against the light, the inexplicable chills amidst the blaze, the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes, all these elements coalesced into a portrait of something that defied logical explanation, a presence that fed on the despair and turmoil of the day. As I aided the evacuees, guiding them through the wreckage with words of encouragement, the sense of this malevolent presence grew stronger. It was as if the very fabric of the disaster was being manipulated, shaped by an intelligence that thrived on the fear and suffering of those caught in its wake. This was no mere figment of stress-induced imagination, but a palpable, almost tangible entity that seemed to draw strength from the chaos it surveyed. The more I acknowledged this presence, the more it seemed to manifest around me. Whispers in the noise, movements just beyond the edge of sight, a feeling of dread that settled in the pit of my stomach, growing heavier with each step we took toward safety. It was a malevolence that seemed intent on exacerbating the already dire situation, an added layer of horror to a day already filled with unspeakable terror. This realization was isolating, a burden that was difficult to share with others. How could I voice these fears without adding to the panic, without sounding unhinged in a situation where calm and leadership were paramount? Yet, in the glances exchanged with my fellow firefighters, in the brief wordless communications that passed between us, I saw echoes of my own apprehensions. We were all feeling it, this sense of an otherworldly oppressor, even as we focused on the very worldly task of saving lives. The confrontation with this realization that there was something else at play beyond the physical dangers of the terror attack was a pivotal moment. It transformed the rescue operation into something more, a battle not just against the flames and the potential collapse of the tower, but against an entity that seemed to delight in the proliferation of fear and despair. This malevolence, intangible yet unmistakable, added a profound depth of terror to the already unfathomable catastrophe. As we continued to aid the evacuees, moving through the damaged, dangerous halls of the World Trade Center, the challenge became not only to survive the physical ordeal, but also to resist the psychological assault of this unseen adversary. It was a dual battle, waged in the heart of one of the most tragic days in modern history, a struggle against both the seen and the unseen, the tangible horrors of the attack, and the spectral malevolence that sought to amplify the tragedy. In the chaotic heart of the North Tower, with the situation growing increasingly dire and the ominous presence that haunted our steps adding to the weight of the day, there came a moment that would forever be etched in my memory. It was a particularly close call with death, not just for me, but for a soul who had given up hope, resigned to a fate amidst the ashes and the rubble. This encounter not only underscored the fragility of life, but also the enduring strength of the human spirit, even in the face of overwhelming darkness. We were making our way through one of the upper floors, the structure groaning ominously around us, when we came across a man slumped against a wall. His clothes were torn, his face covered in soot and dust, a living statue of despair. He looked up at us with eyes that had lost all light, resigned to the end he believed was inevitable. Around him, the remains of the office lay in shambles, a testament to the violence of the attack and the desperation that followed. I approached him, my heart heavy with the knowledge of the limited time we had and the countless lives still in need of saving. "We have to move, now," I urged, extending a hand towards him. But he shook his head, a gesture of defeat, his voice barely a whisper amidst the cacophony of destruction. "It's too late for me," he said, a statement filled with such finality that it momentarily froze me in my tracks. It was a stark reminder of the psychological toll of the day, the way despair could grip a heart and extinguish all hope. But surrender was not an option, neither for him nor for us. With the building's integrity in question and the unseen menace that seemed to feed on such despair, leaving him was unthinkable. "It's never too late," I responded, more firmly this time, reaching out to him again. What followed was a struggle, not just against the physical obstacles that lay between us and safety, but against the pull of despair that threatened to claim another victim. With encouragement from my team, I managed to lift him to his feet, his body heavy with the weight of his resignation. But as we began to move, something remarkable happened. The act of standing, of taking those first faltering steps, seemed to rekindle a spark within him, a flicker of the will to survive. The journey down was treacherous, every step fraught with danger. At one point, a sudden shift in the building's structure sent us sprawling, a shower of debris cascading around us, a tangible reminder of how close death lingered. It was in that moment, pressed against the floor, the taste of dust in our mouths, that the man's hand gripped mine with a strength that belied his earlier despair. We locked eyes, and in his gaze, I saw it the return of hope, the determination to live. We made it out, that man and I, along with the rest of my team and the people we had managed to gather along the way. Emerging into the light of day, the air filled with smoke and the sound of sirens, was like being reborn, a second chance granted by fate or sheer stubbornness. The man who had given up hope thanked me with a depth of gratitude that needed no words, his embrace speaking volumes. That close call with death, that moment of saving someone who had given up hope, was a beacon in the darkness of that day. It was a testament to the power of human connection, of reaching out and pulling someone back from the edge of despair. Amidst the terror and the malevolence that seemed to permeate the air, it was a reminder that hope, no matter how faint, could still shine through, guiding us back to the light. Amidst the chaos and the devastation that unfolded within the crumbling confines of the North Tower, a silent battle raged, a battle not against the flames or the imminent threat of collapse, but against an ominous presence that seemed to feed on despair and amplify the horror of our reality. This unseen adversary, a malevolent force that thrived in the shadows of the tragedy, became as much a part of our ordeal as the physical dangers we faced. Yet, in the heart of this darkness, a profound realization took hold. Our sheer will and unwavering focus on saving lives were the most potent weapons against it. The acknowledgement of this silent battle was not a moment of fear, but one of defiance. With every life we fought to save, with every hand we grasped in the smoke-filled corridors, we were not just pulling survivors from the brink of death, we were also pushing back against the suffocating despair that the present sought to impose upon us. This realization imbued our actions with a deeper significance, transforming our rescue efforts into acts of resistance against an entity that sought to undermine our spirit. The presence, with its chilling whispers and shadowy manifestations, aimed to sow doubt and fear, to feast upon the anguish and terror that such a catastrophe naturally engendered. But as we navigated through the debris, as we lifted the fallen and comforted the frightened, we found strength not just in our training and our duty, but in the shared human connection that emerged in the face of adversity. Each life saved, each reassurance given, felt like a beacon of light piercing through the oppressive darkness, diminishing the power of the malevolence that lurked among us. Our focus became our shield, our determination a spear against the looming despair. The more we concentrated on the tangible, on the here and now, on the very real people who depended on us, the more the ominous present seemed to recede into the background, its influence waning as the indomitable strength of the human spirit shone through. This was not to say the threat it posed was ever completely vanquished. Like the smoke, it lingered, a constant reminder of the dual nature of our fight. This silent battle, this defiance in the face of an unseen enemy, became a source of quiet pride and solace. It was a testament to the resilience of those of us who faced not just the physical aftermath of the attacks, but the psychological and emotional trials as well. The realization that our will and our focus could push back against the darkness added a layer of purpose to our mission, bolstering our resolve when our bodies screamed for rest and our hearts ached with grief. In the end, it was this combination of physical courage and spiritual resilience that defined our response to the day's events. Acknowledging the silent battle with the ominous presence, using our sheer will and focus on saving lives as a way to counter it, was our rebellion against the despair it sought to spread. The collapse of the North Tower was a moment frozen in time, a cataclysmic event that seemed to defy reality, even as it unfolded before our eyes. The horror, loss, and disbelief that accompanied the tower's fall were emotions so profound, so overwhelming, that they seemed to momentarily suspend the very flow of time, creating a chasm of despair, into which all hope appeared to plummet. The initial signs were subtle, almost imperceptible amidst the chaos, a deep groaning rumble that emanated from the bowels of the structure, a vibration that whispered of impending doom. Then, with a roar that drowned out all other sounds, the tower began its descent into collapse, a slow-motion nightmare that played out with agonizing inevitability. The ground shook as if in the throes of an earthquake, dust and debris billowing into the air in a monstrous cloud that blotted out the sun, casting everything into a twilight of terror. For those of us in the vicinity, the moment was one of utter disbelief. Our minds rebelled against the reality of what we were witnessing, unable to fully comprehend the magnitude of the disaster. The tower, a symbol of strength and resilience, was disintegrating before our eyes, its fall marking the end of countless lives and the shattering of an era. The sound of the collapse, a deafening, all-consuming cacophony, was a funeral dirge for the innocent and the brave, a requiem for a city and a nation forever changed. The horror of the collapse was palpable, a physical weight that pressed down on us, stifling breath and thought. It was a moment that encapsulated the darkest fears of humanity, the vulnerability of our creations and our lives laid bare in the face of such unfathomable destruction. The dust that rose in the wake of the tower's fall was more than just physical debris, it was the material manifestation of grief, a tangible expression of the loss that enveloped the heart of New York City. In the immediate aftermath, a stunned silence enveloped the area, a quiet so profound it seemed to echo against the chaos that had preceded it. Then, as the reality of the situation set in, that silence was broken by the sounds of sirens, of shouts, of sobbing, a chorus of despair and determination that would come to define the hours and days that followed. The collapse of the North Tower was not just an end but a beginning, the start of a long journey through grief and recovery, for those who had witnessed it, for those who had survived, and for those who had lost. The disbelief that accompanied the tower's fall was a shared experience, a collective trauma that transcended individual perspectives. It was a moment that challenged our understanding of the world, that tested our faith in safety and security. And yet, within that disbelief, within that horror and loss, there lay the seeds of resilience, a determination to rebuild not just the physical structures that had been lost, but the spirit of unity and strength that no act of terror could ever truly destroy. The North Tower's collapse marked a moment of profound change, a before and after etched into the collective consciousness of the city, a nation, and the world. It was a testament to the fragility of life and the indomitable will to persevere, to rise from the ashes of despair, and face the dawn of a new day with courage and hope. As the North Tower began its catastrophic descent, the world around us transformed into a maelstrom of destruction. Surviving the collapse became a struggle not just against the physical forces unleashed by the falling structure, but against an overwhelming sense of despair, magnified by the ominous presence that had shadowed us throughout the day. This entity, a malevolent force that had woven itself into the very fabric of the tragedy, seemed to reach the zenith of its power in the moments of near death, turning the struggle to survive into a battle of wills that tested the very limits of our spirit. The ground beneath our feet trembled with the fury of the collapsing giant, a tremor that threatened to swallow us whole. Above, the once mighty tower succumbed to gravity, its descent a deafening roar that seemed to herald the end of the world. The air filled with dust and debris, a choking, blinding cloud that turned day into night, erasing all visibility and muffling sounds into a distant, eerie quietude. It was within this apocalyptic shroud that the battle for survival unfolded, a desperate fight to find refuge amidst the chaos, to avoid being crushed under the weight of a dying colossus. In those harrowing moments, as I sought shelter from the relentless advance of destruction, the entity made its presence unmistakably known. The coldness that had accompanied its manifestations now intensified, cutting through the heat and the dust with an unnatural chill that seemed to seep into my very bones. The sense of being watched, of being hunted, grew to a crescendo, a psychological torment that compounded the physical peril with a dread of something far more insidious. The confrontation with the entity in those moments of near death was not a physical battle, but a clash of wills, a struggle to maintain hope and defiance in the face of an adversary that fed on despair. It whispered of inevitability, of the futility of resistance, its voice a chilling caress that sought to erode my resolve, to make me succumb not just to the collapse, but to the void of hopelessness it represented. This was the ultimate test, a trial by fire and shadow, where the stakes were nothing less than the essence of my spirit. Yet, even as the darkness sought to claim me, a spark of defiance burned brighter within. With every breath choked by dust, with every heartbeat thundering in my ears, I fought back against a despair, against the seductive lure of surrender. It was a battle fought in the mind, a contest of faith against fear, where the prize was the will to keep moving, to keep seeking the light even when enveloped by the darkest night. This struggle, this confrontation, was both personal and universal. Around me, others fought their own battles, their own encounters with the entity, and the despair it wielded like a weapon. Together, yet alone, we faced down the darkness, drawing strength from the very human determination to endure, to find meaning even in the midst of catastrophe. Surviving the collapse, emerging from the ruins, was a victory not just over the physical forces that sought to end us, but over the entity that had sought to consume our spirits. The ruins around us bore silent witness to the battle, a testament to the cost of survival. But in that survival, in the defiance that carried us through, there lay a triumph of the human will. A declaration that even in the face of the most profound darkness, the light of hope, the fire of the human spirit, could not be extinguished. This battle of wills amidst the ruins, this struggle to survive against both seen and unseen foes, marked a turning point. It was a reminder that even when faced with the darkest of entities, the human heart possesses a resilience and a strength that can overcome the most daunting of adversities, a beacon of hope that burns all the brighter for having endured the darkness. In the immediate days following the catastrophic attacks that brought the Twin Towers to their knees, the city of New York was engulfed in a profound state of mourning and resilience. The landscape, once dominated by these iconic skyscrapers, was now a smoldering, heartbreaking testament to the events that had unfolded. Amidst this backdrop, the search for survivors became a beacon of hope, a desperate collective effort that brought together firefighters, police officers, medical personnel, and countless volunteers. Each day, we returned to the ruins, driven by the slim hope of finding someone still alive beneath the rubble, each discovery a call for celebration amidst the overwhelming grief. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, streets that were once bustling with life now silent, but for the sounds of rescue and recovery efforts. Makeshift memorials sprung up, seas of candles, flowers, and photographs, each item a tribute to a life lost, a story left unfinished. The air was thick with dust and sorrow, the collective mourning of a city, a nation, in shock. For me, as a firefighter who had been there from the first moment, who had witnessed the unimaginable horror of the tower's collapse and fought through the nightmare to save lives, the personal toll was indescribable. Each day brought with it a relentless barrage of emotions, grief for the lives lost, guilt for those we couldn't save, and an enduring sense of frustration and anger at the senselessness of the tragedy. The physical exhaustion was nothing compared to the emotional fatigue, the weight of the experiences we had endured, and the sights we could never unsee. Sleep became elusive, chased away by nightmares that replayed the events over and over. The moments of silence were the hardest, times when the adrenaline faded, leaving behind a raw, exposed nerve of feelings. Conversations with fellow firefighters often turned into impromptu support sessions, each of us trying to find solace in shared experience, understanding in the eyes of those who had been through the same hell. The presence of the ominous entity that had shadowed our steps on that day seemed to linger, a dark whisper in the back of our minds. Yet, the focus shifted from confronting this unseen adversary to grappling with the very real aftermath of the attacks. The silent battle we had waged against it became a part of our collective memory, a shared ordeal that underscored the depth of our resolve and the complexity of the emotions we now faced. In the midst of this turmoil, the acts of kindness and solidarity stood out, beacons of light in the darkness. Reflecting on those days, the mixture of sorrow and determination, the overwhelming sense of loss tempered by the sparks of hope and unity, I found myself forever changed. The firefighter who had answered the call on that September morning was not the same person who sifted through the ruins in the days that followed. The innocents lost, the lives mourned, and the city forever altered were now indelibly etched into my being. Yet, in the face of such monumental loss and personal toll, there was also a growing sense of purpose, a determination to rebuild, to honor the memories of those lost by living fully, by cherishing the moments of peace and connection. The immediate days following the attacks were a time of mourning, yes, but also a profound testament to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the aftermath of unimaginable tragedy, we have the capacity to rise, to remember, and to rebuild. In the quiet moments that followed the immediate crisis, as the dust began to settle both literally and metaphorically, my mind often wandered back to the dual nature of the battle we had fought on that fateful September day. The tangible horrors, the flames, the smoke, the crumbling facade of the towers were mirrored by an internal struggle against a presence that defied logical explanation. This unseen adversary, which had woven itself into the fabric of our ordeal, left an indelible mark on those of us who felt its chilling influence amidst the chaos. Reflecting on the events, the loss of friends and colleagues was a wound that refused to heal, a constant ache of what-ifs and if-onlys. Their bravery and sacrifice were a testament to the best of us, shining examples of heroism in the face of certain doom. Yet, their absence left voids in our lives, reminders of the cost of duty and the fragility of existence. Each name added to the roll call of the fallen was a story cut tragically short, a potential unfulfilled. We mourned them not just as firefighters, but as brothers and sisters, integral parts of our lives ripped away by the cruelty of fate. Amidst this grief, the unexplained phenomena that had accompanied our efforts that day lingered in the back of my mind. The shadows moving against logic, the inexplicable chills, the sensation of being watched by something that thrived on the despair and terror of the situation. These experiences were difficult to articulate, even to those who had shared them. In the aftermath, as the world focused on the physical destruction and the human cost of the attacks, these encounters seemed to recede, vanishing like mist in the light of day. Yet, they were not forgotten. Conversations with my fellow firefighters sometimes veered into these uncharted territories, tentative explorations of our shared experiences with the unseen. It was as if, in acknowledging these phenomena, we were admitting to a vulnerability, an acknowledgement that there were things beyond our comprehension or control. But there was comfort in these discussions, a sense of solidarity in the face of the unknowable. The presence that had shadowed us, fed on our fears, and added an ethereal layer to our struggles, seemed to lose its power in the retelling, its influence dissipating as we reclaimed our narratives. The phenomena, while they vanished with the end of the immediate crisis, left behind a residue of questions, a curiosity about the nature of the entity we had sensed. Was it a manifestation of the collective trauma and despair of that day, or something more ancient, drawn to the site by the enormity of the tragedy? The answers, if they existed, were beyond our reach, obscured by the limits of human understanding and the passage of time. In reflecting on both the seen and unseen battles of that day, there was a realization that our experiences were part of a broader tapestry of human endurance. The loss of friends, the confrontation with our own mortality, and the encounters with the inexplicable were threads in a larger narrative of survival and resilience. These reflections, while tinged with sorrow and mystery, also carried with them a sense of hope, a belief that, in facing the darkness, both within and without, we could find our way back to the light. The unexplained phenomena, the shadows and chills, became less about fear and more about the acknowledgement of the depth of the human spirit's capacity to face the unknown and endure. As time marched on, these reflections solidified into a quiet resolve, a determination to honor the memory of those we had lost not just by mourning, but by living. By continuing to serve, to protect, and to face each new day with courage, we paid tribute to their sacrifice. The seen and unseen battles of that day, while they marked the end of innocence for many of us, also underscored the strength, the unity, and the indomitable will that defines the best of humanity. Years have passed since the September morning that forever altered the course of history, not just for New York City, but for the world at large. The legacy of 9/11s is complex, woven from threads of pain, loss, heroism, and resilience. As a firefighter who stood on the front line of that day's unimaginable horror, my perspective has been irrevocably shaped by the events I witnessed and the unseen battles I fought. The intervening years have provided some distance, a space for reflection on the global war on terror, the remarkable unity and resilience displayed by communities across the globe, and the personal ghosts that continue to haunt those of us who survived. The aftermath of the attack saw the initiation of the global war on terror, a campaign that aimed to eradicate the threat of terrorism, but also sparked debates on freedom, security, and the costs of conflict. From my vantage point, this war represented a tangible response to the intangible feelings of fear and vulnerability that 9/11 instilled in us. It was a demonstration of the world's collective resolve to stand against forces that sought to divide and terrorize. Yet, the complexities of these efforts, the intertwined narratives of justice and retaliation, have left a lasting impact, raising questions about the nature of security and the price of peace. In the shadow of the Twin Towers' fall, however, a remarkable spirit of unity and resilience emerged. Communities around the world came together in an unprecedented display of solidarity. Vigils were held in distant countries, and people from all walks of life offered their support, their condolences, and their strength. This global outpouring of compassion served as a powerful counterpoint to the acts of terror, a testament to the inherent goodness and empathy that binds humanity together. It was a reminder that, in the face of darkness, the light of community and shared humanity burns all the brighter. For those of us who lived through the events, who breathed the dust and felt the heat of the flames, the legacy of 9/11 is also deeply personal. We carry the ghosts of that day with us, memories of the fallen, echoes of the lost, and the haunting presence of the unseen adversary that loomed in the shadows of the tragedy. These ghosts are constant companions, reminders of the fragility of life and the depth of our bonds to those we've lost. They inhabit the quiet moments, the reflective pauses, serving as both a source of pain and a spur to cherish each moment, each connection. My perspective on the legacy of 9/11 is one of profound complexity. It is a legacy marked by the scars of loss and the specter of global conflict, but also illuminated by the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds of communal support. The unity and compassion that arose from the ashes of the attacks stand as a beacon of hope, a declaration that, even in the darkest of times, we are capable of extraordinary kindness and solidarity. As a firefighter, the legacy of 9/11 has shaped my understanding of duty, of sacrifice, and of the importance of standing together in the face of adversity. It has taught me that resilience is not just a response to tragedy, but a way of living, a determination to move forward, to rebuild, and to honor the memory of those we've lost by living fully in their stead. The global war on terror, the unity and resilience displayed, and the personal ghosts that linger are all facets of a complex legacy, one that continues to influence our world in ways both seen and unseen. Years later, my reflections are tinged with sorrow for what was lost, but also with gratitude for the strength and unity that were found. The legacy of 9/11, with all its shadows and light, remains a testament to the enduring power of hope, the unyielding strength of communities, and the indomitable will of the human spirit to overcome even the most formidable darkness. As the narrative of that September day and its aftermath unfolds across the years, a closing note emerges, a reflection on the importance of memory. It is a call to remember not just the seismic event that shook the world, but also the individual acts of bravery, the intricate layers of personal experience, and the profound human connections that were forged in the crucible of tragedy. This collective memory serves not only as a tribute to those we lost, but as a beacon for future generations, illuminating the depth of courage, compassion, and resilience that defines us at our best. The acts of bravery displayed on 9/11 and in the days that followed were myriad, each a testament to the extraordinary potential for heroism that resides within the ordinary. Firefighters, police officers, medical personnel, and countless civilians stepped into the maw of danger, often at great personal risk, driven by an unwavering commitment to save others. These acts, from the monumental to the seemingly small, wove a tapestry of courage that covered the wounds of that day with a mantle of honor and sacrifice. Remembering these deeds is essential, for they remind us of the capacity for goodness and strength that exists in each of us, ready to be called forth in moments of crisis. The tapestry of memory we weave from these acts of bravery and personal experiences is a complex one, filled with shades of grief, pride, sorrow, and hope. It serves as a living history, a reminder to future generations of the costs of hatred and the value of unity. By remembering, we honor those who were lost and those who rose to meet the moment with courage. We also remind ourselves of the enduring strength of the human spirit, capable of withstanding profound tragedy and emerging with a renewed commitment to compassion, understanding, and solidarity. In this closing note, the emphasis is on the imperative to remember not as a burden, but as a sacred duty. To remember is to acknowledge the depth of our collective journey through darkness and into light. It is to commit to the ongoing process of healing, learning, and growing together as a community, a nation, and a global family. The memory of 9/11s, with its individual acts of bravery and its complex layers of personal experience, is a touchstone for resilience, a guidepost for how we might face future challenges with grace, courage, and an unwavering belief in the power of unity. Let this tapestry of memory, then, be a testament to the indomitable will of humanity to not only endure, but to emerge stronger, more connected, and more compassionate. In remembering, we pledge ourselves anew to the ideals of service, sacrifice, and solidarity, ensuring that the legacy of 9/11s continues to inspire and guide us in the pursuit of a more just, peaceful, and united world. In the years that have passed since the towers fell, life has moved forward, as it inevitably does. The world has witnessed changes, both profound and incremental, and the events of September 11 have settled into the fabric of history, a scar on the collective consciousness of humanity. Yet, the echoes of that day resonate still, a reminder of the fragility of life, the strength of the human spirit, and the enduring power of hope. For those of us who were there, who lived through the horror and the heroism, the passage of time has offered perspective but not closure. The memories, both haunting and heroic, are indelible, carved deep into our being. We carry forward the legacy of those we lost, living our lives in tribute to their memory, embracing each day with a renewed sense of purpose and gratitude. The lessons of that September morning are manifold, a complex tapestry of sorrow and resilience, of division and unity. We learned about the depths of human cruelty and the heights of human kindness, about the destructive power of hate and the healing power of compassion. These lessons, hard-earned and painfully taught, remain our guideposts as we navigate the uncertain terrain of the future. In this journey, it is essential that we remember not just the event itself, but the individual acts of bravery, the personal stories of loss and survival, the shared experience of a world forever changed. These stories, these moments of extraordinary courage and ordinary humanity, are what truly define the legacy of 9/11s. They remind us that in the darkest of times, there is light to be found in the actions of those who stand up, who reach out, who refuse to be bowed by fear or despair. As we move forward, let us carry with us the spirit of unity that emerged in the aftermath of the attacks, a testament to the indomitable will of people everywhere to stand together against the forces of darkness. Let us continue to honor the memory of the fallen, not just in monuments and anniversaries, but in our daily acts of kindness, in our commitment to building a world grounded in understanding and respect. The epilogue of the story of 9/11 is yet to be fully written. It unfolds with each passing day, in the choices we make, in the ways we choose to remember, and in the legacy we build for future generations. It is a narrative of hope, of resilience, and of the enduring strength of love over hate. As we reflect on the complex layers of personal experience and the collective journey since that fateful day, let us reaffirm our commitment to a future defined not by fear, but by our shared humanity, and our unwavering belief in the possibility of a world forged in peace and unity. In the end, beyond the shadows of September, lies the light of our collective resolve, a beacon that guides us forward, illuminating the path towards understanding, healing, and hope. It is in this light that we find our way, together, beyond the echoes of the past, towards a future of our own making.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the video. We highly recommend you watch the next video here. Oops. I'm waiting for you to click. Yes, you've clicked. Happy watching.